we're just going to give you a few minutes for some people to join, and then we'll get going. Hope you're having an excellent Thursday, and that it's dry and sunny where you are.
Right. I think it finally stopped raining.
Finally, eh? Well, we got enough leftover water to last us quite a long time, I think.
I can't believe it. It was amazing. The video, like, it's hard not to get carried away by watching all these videos of flooding everywhere.
Well, you see it happen in other places, and then you see Toronto with some of the areas that you're familiar with, and you're seeing the same thing. And it's like, this is a little too close to home, but yeah, thank goodness it stopped. Today was
You'd
pretty
think the great concrete metropolises would be able to handle it a little bit better than, your average, coastal city or something.
Yeah.
But it's wild. It's wild to see it.
Yeah. And it comes down into the sky faster than we can get rid of it. Yeah. But anyway, no, it's nice and sunny. It's a Thursday, and we're here for the Zodiac webinar. And I think, let's just give it one more minute, and we'll see. We'll let some people join, because we know this is happening over the lunch period for folks, so they got to get their computer set up and going after lunch.
Gotta wait for everything to come out of the microwave.
Yeah. Yeah. Microwave your lunch. Well, bring your lunch with you, sit down, and listen to some great conversation as you eat your lunch.
Yeah, tell us about your lunch. What's for lunch?
Yeah, Steve and I are going to have to eat lunch after.
Yeah, I've adjusted. I do so many webinars over the lunch hour that it just permanently disrupted any kind of lunchtime routine. Happily, though, very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's same with me. I've gotten used to eating lunch at 1, maybe even 2 o'clock. But I get usually when I get real hungry, then lunch happens. But
right. Well, it eventually catches up to you.
Yeah,
it's almost like a different version of intermittent fasting that we could call like inadvertent fasting.
Inadvertent fasting. I like that. That's a phrase I'm going to have to use. Inadvertent fasting. All right, so we got a new phrase, and we're about 3 minutes into it here. So why don't we get started? Thanks for taking the slide down. Let's just start with a couple of introductions, and then we'll get into our topic. So if you don't already know, my name's Wayne Hetherington. I'm the operations guy at Zodiac now, and I've recently joined on the team there, a great, fantastic company with some really great people to work with. And today I'm very happy to be joined by my friend and a very smart guest, Steve Pereira. He is with the Value Stream Consortium, and he's also the co-author of a recently published book on flow engineering. And I'd like to highlight today that if you stick around through the podcast, listen to us, we're going at the end of the podcast, we're going to actually be giving away 2 copies of that book. So you get a chance to enter your email into a draw, and you're going to be able to get a free copy of Steve's book. So please stay tuned for that. Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself. I'll let you do your own introduction here.
Well, thanks. I think you do a great introduction for me, but I've been in tech for a very long time through a bunch of different roles, but the common kind of thread throughout my career is really being sensitive to and focusing on flow and collaboration. I always really struggled to understand what we should all be working on as a group, what was the most important thing, and connecting my efforts as a contributor to value, which is why I'm kind of really excited about this conversation today, because I think that as technologists, as folks in digital knowledge work, there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of cognitive load. A lot of things we got to juggle and keep track of. lots of work in progress. And it's very difficult, I find, without a strong sense of value, to understand that we're heading in the right direction and that we're not pulling against each other, and that we're actually, to use an analogy, rowing together in the same boat in the same direction.
Right, right. Okay, good. So thanks for telling us a little bit about yourself and what you find interesting and important. And it fits in perfectly with today's topic. Our subject today is building products for customer value. And this is kind of an interesting topic for a value stream guy. But just before we get into sort of how that works out, let's just define what we're talking about here. Customer success. When we talk about value to the customers or making our customers successful, just what is it that we're talking about? What comes to your mind when we hear that phrase?
Yeah, value is a challenging subject because it's subjective, right? Everybody has a different definition of what matters to them. But if we kind of zoom out from the personal to a more general understanding of value, we're talking about benefits, like delivered and experienced benefits, things that improve our experience of the world or enhance our abilities, allow us to do things that we weren't able to do before more efficiently, more effectively. So there's a lot of different forms that this can take, but there's also value in many different directions that you might not, commonly associate with value. It's not about increasing revenue or getting the most out of something. It can be efficiency focused. It can be about getting things sooner or more timely, being more responsive. So I think that complicates things for folks because not only does it mean that it's very difficult to nail down what is valuable for any given individual. We have customers, we try not to cater to each of them too individually, right? We want to kind of deliver value to as many people as possible, which means that we have to kind of address the lowest common denominator at times. That's challenging. There's also a challenging dimension when we're thinking about timeliness, because what's valuable to me today might not be valuable to me tomorrow. If I'm going to a party tonight, if I get an outfit that I wanted to wear tomorrow, it's of zero value to me, right? It could be seen as zero value, even though I paid a lot of money for it, and I was excited to get it. I was looking forward to wearing it. A day too late, meaningless, right? And I
Right.
think that's something that's kind of elusive in the world of knowledge work and
Yeah.
digital context. Um,
I
so
heard
yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
I heard a similar statement a while back. What would be more valuable to you, a bag of air or a bag of diamonds? Well, if you're at the bottom of the ocean and you couldn't breathe, probably the bag of air would be a little bit more valuable to
Right.
you. So it's context specific, right? But
Mm-hmm.
okay, so you talked about value from different perspectives here, different time frames. We're thinking about what's valuable to the customer, how we make a product that they will find valuable, and a lot of the times we think of sort of the upfront process, understanding the customer, human-centered design, maybe product design, customer journeys, those types of things. How does that fit in with a value stream? I think when I think value stream, I'm thinking maybe a little further down the line. But what does that mean for you?
Yeah, it's a great topic to look into because I think there's not a lot of commentary or common knowledge about these things. Not a lot of good practices either. But customer journey is one thing that has definitely taken hold and I would say grown roots in the product world. This idea that a customer travels almost like the same journey that you would see a hero in a movie, right? Where they go from a nobody to the central figure in something, and they achieve something of value, or there's some kind of transformation. Customer journey, you know, follows this path of, I have no idea that your company even exists, but I have some kind of a challenge or, desire, and I'm interested in fulfilling it. Right? I'm looking for solutions, and so it encompasses everything from discovery to trying out different options, uh, maybe purchasing before they try something out, maybe after, and then all the way to, okay, if that experience is positive and they do experience value, then they'll recommend that to other people, and you see this growth as a result.
Yeah.
And that's been very powerful in product. But the connection to value streams for me is about, how do you make any of that happen? How do you actually influence that customer journey? You can't drag a customer through a customer journey. You have to entice them through. You have to make it easy for them to progress. You have to eliminate friction and doubt and uncertainty. You have to engender trust and all of these things that make that customer journey flow. And to me, the way that I visualize this is, I've got a customer journey that's kind of like top of mind here. The most important thing in the company is making that customer journey flow. And then underpinning it and supporting it and sort of enabling this progress through the journey is these value streams that deliver capabilities, marketing campaigns, information, abilities, interventions at very strategic points, that are sometimes pushed to the customer in the case of marketing, but sometimes pulled by the customer, right? But in all cases, these things are delivered by value streams. And even further than that, these value streams are often interdependent, right? So the value stream that delivers the marketing campaign that drives the initial awareness depends on assets and resources, in many cases, things like screenshots and videos that are going to be delivered as a result of the product development that's happening for the next version of the software, right? Because you want to tease the latest thing. That's a part of the timeliness aspect of this.
Yeah.
So it can quickly get maybe complicated in everybody's mind to try and think about, okay, well, all these things are interconnected. But I think anchoring on customer journey is very helpful to me, and thinking about what are the things that are removing the blocks and enticing the customer through that journey.
Yeah, yeah, which is very interesting, and I want to pick your brain a little bit more on that in just a moment, how we would actually put that together. But I think it's important to first of all highlight the need for customer feedback, and it's not just, you think of some empathy mapping or the other techniques where we try to understand our customer at the beginning, and then we go into this little black box and we build up a whole bunch of stuff. It pops out at the end and we say, oh, here you go, here's exactly what you wanted. And often the customers are scratching their heads, I didn't ask for this. Or the other thing, I think of, some of the really great products that I've used, like my cell phone. The cell phone that I'm using today is a whole lot different than the cell phone that I used 10 years ago, or even 10 years before that. It's changed a lot in that period of time. So the products are really useful. They help me to be successful. I think they're successful products, but they've evolved over time. And I think that is probably due to customer feedback. So what do you think, how important is customer feedback in the process of developing our products?
I think it's everything. I think it's everything that we do has to be generating a signal that we can interpret, right? Like any kind of action generates some kind of impact on the world that provides feedback to us, whether we are able to see it or measure it or not. There's something that happens. And what's really critical about customer feedback, I think, is you've got active feedback, right? People think about active feedback as your customer telling you something. And I find that's incredibly valuable. It's very important to kind of enable that, like provide channels where your customers can tell you things. But on the other end of the spectrum is inactive feedback, where you're able to collect information about what's happening based on those actions, right? The effects of those actions are generating what some people call like digital exhaust, right? Like things that are happening that you can collect data points on. You can be looking for those signals. And so I think it's a blend of these things, make it easy for customers to tell you what they want to tell you, um, and synthesize that and combine that with what's actually happening. And it's a combination of those things will give you a very high quality signal of, because people don't always do what they say. Sometimes they don't speak up, but their actions speak very loudly for them. So being able to instrument your products, but also, instrument your customer journey and instrument your value streams to understand how early can we get those signals, how can we get those signals as close to the action as possible so that they are accurately connected as closely as possible to what actually drove that feedback. That's all super important. And then the other piece that's really important is the timeliness dimension on acting on that feedback, right? If you're getting a bunch of feedback and then what happens is you wait a very long time, or it takes a very long time for you to deliver a response to that, you could be delivering value for a previous scenario that no longer applies. And this is like probably true for every company that had a roadmap prior to ChatGPT. Everything goes out the window, and it's you've got to reevaluate everything. So the faster you can deliver, the faster you can kind of capitalize on that customer feedback and look responsive, look like you care, look like you are, really trying to maximize value.
Yeah, and not just looking like it, but actually doing it. What you're saying takes me back to even a little further back when COVID first happened. Of course, everything changed when COVID happened, but I found myself working from home, therefore not driving very much anymore. And I think a lot of people are the same thing. So insurance companies who were smart picked up on that right away and started offering different types of insurance coverage for people who were driving less, and therefore, less risk and all of that kind of thing. Other companies didn't pick up on that at all, or they picked up on it and responded to it way too late. I get a rebate now, but COVID's ended and I'm back to my normal driving habit. Doesn't help me now. So yeah, listening to the customer. So all of this stuff is fantastic, Steve. But in theory, but now in practice, we don't want to just listen to our customer at the beginning and then ignore them throughout the whole rest of the product development, or we don't want to respond to later, all of those things that you mentioned. So how do we go about this in practice? How do we include customer feedback in our build process so that we can really understand, how the customer is doing and then guide the product development?
Yeah, I lean on my experience with value stream management here to kind of inform not only the scope of what we need to consider, like the entire path to production from inception or initial customer desire, all the way to delivery on that and fulfillment. And the way that we kind of characterize it in the value stream management world is flow and realization. So flow being the things that are happening to enable and deliver that. What we say is expected value, because we don't know until we've actually delivered. And then value realization being what's possible once you deliver. You're able to realize that value by putting it in front of customers and having them react to it positively or negatively. If you're lucky enough that they notice that you did anything at all. And then to speak to this upstream, aspect of trying to do things early, to shift things left, to build in, you know, value added aspects of your process as early as possible. You know, there's kind of this aspect of value reconciliation where we say we have something we think will be valuable, and that could be you know, an initial concept that you put out via marketing channels and see how people respond to it before you've built anything. It could be initial prototypes with a group of um, you know, particularly involved or vocal or influential users, to get early feedback, right? On get those signals on, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down, or, you know, you've got something, but you need to work on it.
Right.
And a lot of that activity can be shifted left, right? Earlier in the flow of activity that maximize your odds of success, maximize your odds of delivering value, which I think is really important because there's a lot of risk, you know, trying to build and deliver something that may or may not resonate with your customers.
Right. Okay. That's excellent advice. So shifting left, building it into the process, doing it as early as possible, maybe not just at the front, but also through the process. We've got a comment here from a LinkedIn user. I don't think it's about the speed of delivery, but speed of information or informed decision making. Delivery is an output, but the outcome of that delivery is based on the clarity of decision making. So makes sense to me. Does that?
I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. Ultimately, everything that gets delivered is the result of decisions and prioritization and choosing what not to do, kind of grappling with that risk. And your informed decision making is hopefully influenced by the mitigation of that risk and building up good signal and signal response mechanisms in your, you know, in your process that allow you to kind of narrow that gap between we think this will be valuable and we're actually getting somewhere.
Now, Steve, I wanted to ask you about one thing, a recurring theme that, oops, here's the book. I don't know if it'll come into focus. I got the blur on. But in your book, a recurring theme that I seem to see almost every chapter is mapping things. You're mapping this, you're mapping that, you're mapping the value stream, you're mapping the customer journey, you're mapping all kinds of things in here. So can you tell me a little bit about how mapping fits in with the overall process and how the customer might be involved with that?
Yeah, to me, mapping is kind of an underappreciated skill, and especially now that it's been enabled by collaborative whiteboards, especially during COVID. But I think that recent advances, you know, now you're seeing generative AI and LLMs allowing you to do incredible things with maps, which is basically just the act of taking what's locked inside of everybody's head and getting it out onto a canvas that we can all work with. We can all see it and we can all work with it to drive a common understanding. And I think that that's an incredibly powerful capability. So I'm really a big fan of this, and I've been using it for many years now. But it's, you know, even as recently as a couple of weeks ago now, it's way more powerful than I ever imagined that it could be. You know, now you can take a section of a map and have AI synthesize it into action items or summarize it into a report. And what that allows us to do is not replacing work or any kind of activity, but it's a big enhancement. And it allows us to create a common understanding across many different individuals. Like each individual, you ask them at any given moment, you know, how they define value or what's the most important thing that our customers care about. You'll probably get a different answer from everybody. And so the ability to map is really about taking that out of people's heads and putting it on something that we can all work with and come to a common understanding. And it applies to all kinds of different techniques. In flow engineering, we have a very specific sequence of activities with specific maps that are meant to drive, as we say in the book, effective action. What we want to get to is, what are the most important actions for us to take to improve flow in our organization at a team level, team of teams level, department level, whatever the scale is. But the mapping really is how you benefit from the fact that you have all these different contributors with all these different perspectives and expertise. And we always think about the elephant problem, right? If you're blind trying to figure out what you're in front of, it really depends on where you are. You're going to have a very different opinion based on your perspective. And another one that we think of a lot is standing on different street corners at the same intersection, right? Depending on where you're standing and where you're facing, you see a very different landscape, even though you're in almost the same place. So we see that all the time in organizations, that you kind of take for granted that everybody has the same perspective because you're working together all the time. But it's very rarely the case.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I like the idea of different perspectives, and of course, we normally struggle with aligning our perspectives within an organization, but there's that extra layer out beyond the organization of the customers that we're serving, and how do we layer in their viewpoints and their expectations as well, and align together with our customers. So I think mapping could be a very powerful technique if we were to start to include some of the customer viewpoints, the customer feedback, build that into our process, actually map out the process to include some of those things. Steve, this is great. Let me see here. What was my next question? I was thinking, when we have a well-defined value stream, maybe we've mapped it out, we've got customer feedback inserted into the process, so we're taking this into account, we're allowing it to affect our product development. What do you think is the result on the end product?
That is, I think, somewhat predictable and unpredictable, right? One of the things that's wonderful about product development is we don't really know what our customers are going to find valuable and what they're going to do, because they have a completely different perspective than us, and we're never going to be able to bridge that gap entirely. Just the same way that we can't bridge the gap between two individuals working on the same team. We're just always going to see things somewhat differently.
Right.
But I think that there are a lot of intentional actions that you can take to reduce that risk, to kind of incorporate as much feedback as possible and build confidence that you're actually delivering something of value. But then it's really about listening to what actually happens afterwards, and then coming to the reconciliation of, okay, well, this is what we thought, but this is what happened. And learning from that gap, because there's always going to be a gap. So I think it's not only increasing our odds of delivering value, but it's about recognizing when we have learning from that and incorporating that learning, synthesizing that learning, and incorporating it into our next effort as effectively as possible is so important to avoid drifting off track by following the same assumptions, or not adjusting when we have information.
Yeah, I like the idea too, kind of tying in what you were saying before about, maybe we had a really successful product and it's been there serving the customers well for years, but things change, and the timeliness of it, if we don't have a way to get those that customer feedback in and see how things are changing, then, or we're too proud to say that what we did yesterday isn't maybe what we should be doing today, then we're going to end up creating the wrong product again. We're not going to be delivering value to the customer. So not only understanding what the customer is, getting that immediate feedback, but also being willing to act on it and change, I think are very important. And of course, we're going to get much better products that stay current with people as we do this. Steve, I want to shift direction for just a little bit there, because you had an interesting chapter in your book. You talked about the traps of some common traps in flow engineering. And I just wanted to pick your brain for a little bit. What kinds of things have you seen go wrong, or what types of problems do we commonly encounter when we're trying to do something like this?
Well, I think, kind of piggybacking on what we've been talking about, assuming that we understand a situation that has a lot of complexity is the first way that we go wrong, right? Like assuming that we've got it right and we're heading in the right direction, or that we've got it wrong and we're not looking to kind of narrow that gap actively. We're not looking to test our assumptions and invite feedback. Like a big part of flow engineering is facilitation. The most important part of flow engineering is facilitation, because when you're dealing with people and trying to get them to share what's locked up inside their heads, there's a lot that goes into that, right? I mean, there's the safety of the environment, but also the ability to kind of dig a little bit deeper, or ask a follow-up question, or solicit input or feedback from someone who hasn't spoken up. Be curious about the way that somebody phrases something if it's surprising to you. So facilitation, I think, is the hardest thing that I've ever learned. Like by far, it's a lifelong skill to have good conversations with people, and not only that, but enable conversations between other people. Another big part about facilitation is to be outside of the stakes, right? To not have a vested interest in the outcome, so that you don't put your thumb on the scale inappropriately. I mean, you can prod, you can sort of try to get the best out of everybody participating. But if you're trying to steer things in a specific direction, all of a sudden you're introducing a bias that kind of poisons the process, and has very real risk to the perception of psychological safety in that space. Like, you need people to be authentic, candid, open, detailed, willing, engaged, all of these things. So we have an entire chapter on traps to avoid, but we also have tips and traps for each of the maps, because each of the maps has a specific purpose and method. So we try to kind of compile all the things that we've learned the hard way over the years by going into workshops and having everything from cameras off, mute, very low engagement, to people leaving, abruptly, because they either, don't see value themselves in the workshop, or, they just haven't prioritized it and something else came up, or they're going to get lunch, right? There's any number of things that can sidetrack this. So I think it's very important to establish value for the participants when you are working through things like mapping. What are they going to get out of it? What's in it for them? And so describing the benefits of not wasting time, not working against each other, not being frustrated that nobody's on the same page. There's a lot of benefits. And I think it's very important, just like we market products and we market services, to market ideas and things that we're trying to do to make things better. You've got to convince people all day, every day, of everything. Because assuming that they're going to see the value that you see is one of those mistakes.
Yeah. As you're talking, at least half a dozen different cognitive biases pop into my mind that could be misleading for us in this whole entire thing. So it's good to be aware of those things and take them into account. Just one last question for you, Steve, before we get into some questions from the audience, though. I was thinking a little bit about measurement because implementing a process that includes customers should give us a better result and a more usable product. But how do we know if that's actually happening? Is there some way that we can introduce measurements and a little bit of precision into our flow engineering?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, the first thing to think about here is, what are you trying to do, right? What is the outcome that you're trying to enable or achieve? And that's really at the center of flow engineering. The first stage is really understanding your target outcome, because there's infinite things you could try to measure and infinite detail. And there's infinite ways that you could correlate different metrics, and you can come to very wrong conclusions if you get that incorrect. And so it's very important to kind of focus on what you're trying to achieve, to constrain that list of everything possible to the most important things that you can directly connect to achieving that outcome or enabling progress. And so we start there and try to understand, like, and value under the context of that outcome is, I commonly think of across three dimensions. There's customer value, external customers, but there's also stakeholder value. So people in leadership positions in the organization, people with serious, let's say, incentives to drive specific outcomes or specific progress. And then the contributors themselves is the last one. And arguably the most important, because that is the motivation that's going to fuel all of this. So understanding the value of that target outcome to those three groups of people, three cohorts of people, is critical, because each of them will have a different metric of success, a different metric of value.
Right.
If we think about individual contributors, what's value to them? It's personal achievement, it's achieving a sense of flow in their work, pride in their work, a sense of progress, learning, exposure to new experiences, stability, consistency. There's all kinds of things, right? There's any number of things that motivate and deliver value to contributors. And then stakeholders have a completely different set of concerns, right? They have all of those plus, they have those for themselves, but then they also have accountability for financial results and risk mitigation. And then in your external customers, you want to understand their level of satisfaction, their propensity to recommend the company, their investment as an advocate, or even engagement enough to give you a review. One of the things that's really been a focus since the book came out is, you got to get reviews. It's like a flywheel for the whole thing. The book doesn't reach people unless you've got reviews, because there's an entire machine that anchors on that signal of success. Like, that's how Amazon measures value, for instance, and a lot of book resellers measure that. And so thinking about that target outcome and working backwards to what metrics can we most closely connect to those things. And sometimes you want a metric that you expect to go up, and maybe you have, or down, and then you have another metric that is meant to kind of balance that out and make sure that pulling in that one direction doesn't pull you away from something important. One of the classics is, folks always work with me when they want to deliver more throughput or get faster feedback. And what you also want to measure is that your quality doesn't decline as a result of that. You don't want to speed up and start delivering garbage all the time. So balancing metrics is also really, really important.
Yeah, I've heard it said too that if you've got some really good designed metrics, they'll measure opposite things, like the speed versus quality, and that way you will achieve some balance. There's lots of other examples of that that just don't come to mind at the moment, but it really does emphasize the fact that we should be careful what we measure, and it can be difficult to measure the right thing. We talked a little bit about should we measure first? Should we produce a product and then measure it, or should we come up with some measurements and then create the product? Any tips or traps on the order in which we do things?
I think lean startup went a really really far way. I don't know how to phrase it, but contributed a lot to our modern way of thinking about producing value and grappling with that fact that you don't know until you've put something in front of a customer. But there's a lot of misconceptions, and there's a lot of different ways that you can misinterpret minimum viable product, for instance, to borrow from lean startup. And
Right.
what does it take what does it mean to create a minimum viable product? And I'm not going to relitigate that here. I think what's really important is what is the minimum that gives you feedback and a signal that you have something of value to offer,
Yes.
and then investing in that further, right? And viable has to be defined by you and your team and your customers. Minimum also, and then product has to be something that you understand collectively. And to me, that's part of mapping is saying, I define product this way, I define minimal this way. We all have to define these things the same, because what happens is we get into the value stream, we try to do something, and someone's interpretation of minimal directly conflicts with someone else's. And so that will lead you into complete disarray where folks are working against each other, where there's just a general sense of confusion about these things. So I think lean startup is great. Jobs to be done. Another way to kind of frame this really powerfully. And then to me, even earlier than that, just lean itself, the practice of lean, first step, define value. We don't always know what value is until we've delivered something, but we can define a hypothesis. We can define an informed, speculative sense of value. And maybe we start with what's valuable to the organization, because we're going to be able to get feedback and progress that way. Sometimes you've got to first, before you can get anything in front of customers, you have to win over your boss. And
Yes.
maybe you have to help your boss win over their boss. And so it's important to consider that value from different people's perspectives, because the catalyst, the thing that moves things forward, might not be what you think it is.
Right. Yeah, interesting effects that come from measuring stuff. But very good thoughts, Steve. Thank you very much for helping us through that. I just want to reserve a couple of minutes for any questions from our audience. And I'm just looking at some of the comments here. We've got some really great comments, everything from suggestions. Suggestions about how you might go about doing some of this stuff, and some really great viewpoints and opinions here. I'm just looking for questions, and we'll open it up. If you've got a question for Steve, anything about producing products that are valuable to customers, or flow engineering, or his book, please post them and we'll try to answer them now. I noticed one question in here. Do you use use cases to trigger their outcome? To trigger the customer explaining what they want out of the product in something like a simulation? So basically use cases to capture customer feedback.
I think that can be I don't really have a standard approach to product development, because I'm not a product manager, aside from what I'm building with flow engineering. But I have served as a product manager in the past and a product owner, and I think that cases can be very valuable because in a lot of situations, especially when you have somewhat of a complex landscape or a complicated product, it's difficult for a customer to kind of place themselves in relation to it and understand, uh, how does this actually help me with my abstract problem that I maybe haven't been able to verbalize. I haven't been able to describe it or put a point on it or define it in a concise way.
Right.
A case study can kind of walk people through an analogy that they could say, well, oh, that is a lot like my scenario. And we find it easier in many, many cases to work from something, uh, especially that's wrong. I think Cunningham's law is basically like if you want to get a correct answer, you post something wrong on the internet.
Yeah.
And so putting something out there to be used as, some people say it's a straw dog. It's something that you sort of use to target and compare to. I think that's very powerful rather than a blank page. A blank page is very intimidating
Yeah.
and doesn't really constrain us. Constraints are as positive as they are negative, right? You can have an enabling constraint as much as you can have a governing constraint. And so an enabling constraint could be that case study that says, here's an example, use that as a reference to tell your own story.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got, good. Thanks for that. We've got one more question. Well, we've got a couple of questions here. One comes from Zach. I'm not sure you've heard of this. I haven't, but he asks, have you heard of lean scenes?
I haven't, but I like the alliteration there.
Sounds intriguing, doesn't
Sounds
it?
fun.
Yeah.
I
And in a
will look
follow-up
into
comment,
it.
he says they provide maker team perception and one up, two up boss perspectives to make improvements to processes or products. So I think that's going to be something I'm going to be looking into.
Me too. It sounds like it's right up my alley. Thanks, Zach.
Maybe a little easier question from Ro. I don't know if this is silly or relevant, but where do you see AI and AI tools like ChatGPT and such fitting in here, and how might that happen?
I think there's so many use cases that once I get thinking, it just doesn't stop how many different ways we can utilize this type of technology. I think, when we're talking about different perspectives and we're trying to come to a common understanding of something, or even just deal with the fact that we have so many different perspectives. AI does a really great job of synthesizing language. It does a really good job of taking 18 different things and telling you what's in common across them. And it may not be perfect, and you always have to check its work, but it can be an incredible time saver. And just like we mentioned, it can be that frame of reference that allows you to avoid the blank page and start from something that gives you a reaction, right? That triggers a thought, that triggers an opinion, that triggers curiosity. I think that's very powerful. The ability for us to generate all kinds of different artifacts from prior art is really powerful. I'm working with a company that generates value streams with generative AI, and they can create all kinds of different value streams that you can use as a reference. If you have a content creation process, or you have, product development or research and development, if you have a complicated regulatory environment, ChatGPT has slurped up so much information about how those things work. It could be something, it could be highlighting something that you would miss, or you forgot about, or you just don't really know what level of granularity makes sense for this. You can ask ChatGPT, generate me a 20-stage value stream that describes product development, to get an idea like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I can see the divisions, the handoffs there. So as a reference, it's fantastic for synthesis of data. It's fantastic, to break ties. It's fantastic, right? I have an opinion and you have an opinion. We can feed them both to ChatGPT and say, which one, right? Merge them together, or pick the one that's most
Maybe
clear.
Get the best of both, right?
In a lot of cases, right. In a lot of these cases, it doesn't matter, because what matters is what the customer actually experiences. And so all the deliberation and consensus that we're trying to achieve in the process is insignificant compared to the outcome for the customer, right? So in a lot of cases, I think there's a lot we can do, and it's really exciting. It's very distracting, but very exciting.
Yeah, interesting, eh? And I think we can use AI for lots of different things, but AI will never replace the customer unless AI becomes the customer. So when AI bots start buying your book, then I'll be happy to include them. But anyway, no, excellent, Steve. Thank you very much for your comments on that. I don't know that we have any more questions coming in. A couple of extra comments, and they're all fantastic. So thank you very much for joining us, everybody. We'll just wrap it up here now and give you a couple of minutes to eat your lunch. We've got a couple of links that are going to be posted in the chat here. So if you want to buy Steve's book, there's a link for that. If you'd like to connect with Steve or myself on LinkedIn, we're going to put our links up there for that as well. We're more than happy to connect with you and chat about this kind of stuff. Steve also runs a podcast on flow engineering, so we'll put up a link to that. And here we have on the slide in front of you right now, this is a QR code to our mailing list. If you follow the QR code and you give us your email, join the mailing list, we're going to select 2 lucky people to receive a free copy of Steve's book off of that mailing list. So please follow that link. And then just one more thing right at the very end here, we've got some feedback that we'd like from you, because Zodiac is interested in our customers just like everybody else, and we need your feedback. So this webinar, please tell us what you thought about this webinar. That QR code that you're looking at right now is a feedback form, 3 simple questions. It won't take a whole lot of your time. Just what did you think of this webinar today? How would you improve it? And I want to say thank you, Steve, for joining me today, and all the best to you. I hope your engines flow and everything is great. Stay dry, and yeah, don't go for a swim on the Don Valley.
I never do. Thanks, Wayne.
Okay, great. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time.